Welcome, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah.
Amen.
So we're on to, as you can see, this is a new chapter right there, chapter 10 in Genesis. We are, we're making progress as we go through Torah Temimah. And this is the chapter that discusses the descendants of Noah. It's a genealogy, and we come up with this idea of 70 nations, that if you count the number of descendants of Noah, you wind up with 70. So that they're basically the nations of the world. And the biblical names, the question is, what countries are these biblical names referring to? And so the Torah Temimah that we're going to be looking at is actually going to be looking and trying to use sources, essentially Talmudic sources or rabbinic sources, I could say, that try to identify these particular places nowadays. So, Ve'ele toldot b'nei Noach. These are the descendants of the children of Noah. Shem, Ham, v'Yafet. Shem, Ham, and Yafet. Vayivaldu lahem banim. Sons were born to them achar Mabul, after the flood. So we're not going to have anything until we get to verse 2. So here we go. B'nei Yafet. Gomer, Umagog, Umadai, v'Yavan, v'Tuval, Umeshech, v'Tiras. Okay, so some of these we can recognize. Madai is actually Medea, and Yavan is the Hebrew word for Greece. But none of the other places actually, are identifiable. And so we're going to take a look. We'll see what they do with it. So, Gomer, etc. Gomer zo germamia, kamarmia. Let's take a look what he has to say. V'chein hagirsa b'Yerushalmi. He says this is also the version of the text in the Jerusalem Talmud, Germamia. In the Yerushalmi Megillah, in the tractate Megillah, Perek Aleph, that's chapter 1, Halacha Tet, that's the way the Jerusalem Talmud is subdivided. Muva Aruch, and in the Aruch, that's the special dictionary, this dictionary that of Aramaic and Rabbinic words, Erech Garmamia. So again, the entry in the Aruch, this dictionary, is Germamia. Bishnehem b'mem. So we notice that in all these different versions, in the Megillah version and in the Aruch version, they're spelled with the mem, Germamia. V'yitachen, and it would appear, de girsa zo mechuvenet, that this in fact is the right text. This is the right version of the text. El Tirgum Hapasuk Becheskel, to translate that is the Aramaic translation, the verse in Ezekiel chapter 27, verse 14, Mi Beit Turgarma, right? So there again, Mi Beit Turgarma, Mi Beninat Germamia. So he translates the Ezekiel chapter or verse where it says "Be beit Togarma" as the nation of the state of Germania. Vahagra, but this is the Vilna Gaon Rabbi Eliezer, the Vilna Gaon, one of the about I think 18th century perhaps. Yeah, I'd say around that 1700s. An incredible mind, brilliant scholar. Hegia, he has the version. Bagamara Khan, but Germania Benun. So there where it talks about Germania in his version, he says it should be Germania, right? Like Germany, right? With a nun. Ukinire, and it would appear, kivein legirsat Tirgum Yonatan, that the reason why he comes up with that version of it, with a nun there, the version of the Targum Yonatan, this is the Aramaic translation of Yonatan. And it says, Shekain hu gores, because that's the way Yonatan reads it. So if you look at this, right, I was really puzzled about what these words were. I didn't recognize these words at all. So I went to Safaria, which has the Torah Temimah in regular Hebrew print, and there it said Shekain Hu Gores. And in this particular, there is this nun here, should actually belong right over here. So that's what happened when they printed this version of Torah Temimah, and they missed this typo. So it just simply means, because that's the way Yonatan understands it. He writes it as Germania. Aval lo nitba'er li, but it doesn't seem clear to me, Torah Temimah goes on to say, Lama hichriya kegirsat Rabbi Tirgom Yonatan. Why did the Vilna Gaon choose that particular version, his particular textual version, neged girsat Gemara, as opposed to the version in the Gemara, Habavlit, that is the Babylonian Talmud, v'ha'Yerushalmit, and also the Jerusalem Talmud, v'girsat ha'aruch. And remember, we mentioned that it's also in the girsa, in the version of the Aruch. And this is actually not a nun; it's a sort of badly printed tzaddik, which stands for v'tzarich iyun. This requires further investigation, because the Vilna Gaon is not a small consideration. He is a very authoritative figure, and why he should have picked that is not really certain at all. So, of course, Germania does not sound necessarily as the same country. In fact, I don't know of a country called Germania, and I can't think easily of some similar name nowadays that sounds like it. Of course, Germania sounds totally like Germany. So, in fact, and maybe that's why the Vilna Gaon chose it, because it did sound like Germany. Who knows? But I assure you, I'm just throwing that out, but I'm not certain at all. Right. So, going on, we got some more. Magog, right? Zocandia, right? So this is a place called Candia. I imagine there is such a place on the map, although I can't think of what it's referring to. Madai, okay. Zo Macedonia, that's Macedonia. So Madai is Macedonia. And by the way, it makes sense because Yavan, Greece, is right next to Macedonia, right? And he says Yavan kamashma'or, just as it says. As I mentioned today, the word Yavan continues to exist, referring to Greece. So anyway, going back to Macedonia, he Malchut Macedonia biyamenu. This is, in fact, the kingdom of Macedonia in our days, be'Europa, in Europe, Etzel Yam HaTichon, near the Mediterranean Sea, Hamavdil ben Europa, which distinguishes between Europe, Afrique, and Africa. So the Mediterranean Sea, obviously, marks a division between Europe and Africa. Vahabach, right? We've mentioned the Bach before. Hegiha, so he has a version, Madai Kamashma'o. He says that Madai is Medea, right? So he Kamashma'o, just as it sounds. But Yavan, Zo Macedonia. And he sort of flips it and says, and Yavan is Macedonia. V'chein hu hagirsa, and that is in fact similar to the version of the text, the Ein Yaakov, in the Ein Yaakov. The Ein Yaakov is a collection of Agadata from the Talmud, because of course the Talmud, the Babylonian Talmud, contains a lot of halachic material, legal material, but it also contains some non-legal material, and the Ein Yaakov is that collection. And I believe the author of that is, or the editor of it is Yaakov ibn Habib. Uvi Yerushalmi Megillah. So likewise, this is the version in the Yerushalmi in Tractate Megillah, Perek Aleph, chapter 1, Halacha Tet, Halacha number 9. V'zeh muskan And this, in fact, is in agreement, Lefi Shmot HaMedinot Shebeyameinu, according to the names of the countries in our own time, our current countries, what we call them, Shemalchut Macedonia, right? Because we notice that the kingdom of Macedonia, he b'medinat Yavan, it's actually part of the state of Yavan, of Greece. It's part of it. As I mentioned, they're right next to each other, and they're identified here. So onwards, yeah. So we mentioned Yavan, Tuval, Tuval zo Beit Onaiki. So this Tuval is a place called Beit Onaiki. Let's take a look. Yerushalmi Megillah Perek Aleph Halachatet, and in the Yerushalmi, he's obviously this Megillah, tractate Megillah in the Jerusalem Talmud, chapter 1, Halacha 9, has a lot of these different names here. Uva Midrashim, and in other Midrashim, Girsot Shonot Bazeh. There are different versions of this particular, of this Tuval, of what Tuval is. Uva Makom Beit Onaiki, and in the place of Beit Onaiki, Hagirsa, the version there is Beitunia, and I wonder if he's referring to see, this is what I mean by saying that there is some, similar sounding place in modern English, etc., right? Some cognate. So is it Bosnia? But Omnam, and in fact, Nimtza Hayom, today there is found Chelek Eretz, there it is, Bazia. Ba'azia Aktana, there is a place in the land of Asia Minor, Etzel Yam HaShachor, near the Black Sea, Beshem Beit Bothnia. There we are, right? Bothina, Bethina. So I'm pretty sure he's referring to Bosnia. Let's go on. Meshech zo Mosia, right? So Meshech refers to a place called Mosia. I don't recognize it. He Eretz Musia Sheba Asia Hakatana. So this is the land of Mosia. I can't think offhand of a modern term for this. If any of you can think of it, let me know. Just speak out there. Smucha le'eretz Botina, right? So it's again next to Bosnia. Yen ba'ot hakodem. So he says, you can see, because of course he refers to Bosnia in the previous note. Did somebody want to say something? Okay. All right, let's go on. Tiras. Pligi ba Rabbi Simai v'Rabbanan. So in terms of the identification of Tiras, there was a difference of agreement between Rabbi Simai and the rabbis. Chadamar zo Beit Tiraiki. One of them said it's Beit Tiraiki. Sounds very much like Turkey, right? V'chad Amar zo Paras. And one of them said, no, it's Persia. So there's a difference of opinion here, trying to identify what country these are referring to now. Yitachen, it would appear, the Beit Tiraiki, Shehi Medinat Tarakia, right? So that I think is the version of Turkey, right? Sheba Eretz Anatolia, right? Anatolia. So that is Anatolia, right? So again, you can see there's some modern terms here going, and I believe that's it for here. Let me just keep on reading here. Ma'ela nifredu iye hagoyim, from these were scattered the isles of the peoples, ba'artzotam, in their various lands, ish lil shono, a man according to his language, the mishpachotam begoyehem, according to their families among the nations. Uvnei Cham, and the children of Cham, Cush uMitzrayim ufut uknan. Cush, Mitzrayim, Fut, Uknan. Uvnei Cush, and now we're going to get into them. Sva b'chavila, Siva. So that sounds very much like Sheba, right? And Chavila, Vesavta, Vera'ama, Vesavtacha. Uvnei Rama, Shava, Udedan, and the children of Rama, Shava, and Dedan. Here we go. Savta, Varama, Vesavtaka. Tana Rav Yosef, Rabbi Yosef taught, Skistan Gevaita, Skistan Baraita, meaning whatever this Skistan, inner Skistan and outer Skistan, Bein Chada Lachada, between the two, Mea Parse, 100 Persian miles, Vahikifa Alfe Parse, and its border, its circumference is, I think, several thousand Persian miles. And we see this is from Yoma. Let's see what he says. Ritzuno Lamar. So what is he trying to say? The Savta Vesaptaka, that these terms, Savta and Saptaka, Shiman Shave, that they obviously sound very similar, that they're essentially the same country, the same area, same locale. Ella, the Achat Haita Pnimit, but the only difference was that one of them was inner, Va'achat Chitzonit, and another one outward facing. Uvein chada lachada me'a parse, and between the one nation and the other nation was 100 Persian miles. Let's see if there's anything here. All right, go on. V'chush yalad et Nimrod, and Cush sired Nimrod. Hu hechel liot gibor ba'aretz. He began to be a hero, right, a mighty man in the land. And we did look at the Rashi on this and what it meant. Let's see. Hu haya gibor tzait lifnei Hashem. He was a mighty man in the presence of God. And again, it essentially means he opposed God. He did it in God's face. Al Kenya Amara. For this reason, it is said, "Can Nimrod, like Nimrod, gibor tzait lifnei Hashem, a mighty hunter before God." Again, meaning that negatively. Vatahi Reshit Mamlacho Bavel, and his principal kingdom was Babylonia. Ve'erech and Erech ve'akad ve'chalneh, and Erech Apad and Kalneh. Be'eretz Shinar, in the land of Shinar. Let's take a look and see. Here we have something. Bavel ve'gomer, Bavel kamash ma'as. So he's saying Bavel, Babylonia, just like it sounds. Erech ze oraichut, or Orichut. Erech is this place nowadays that they identified as Orichut in their time. Akkad ze Baskar. Akkad refers to a place called Kaskara. Kalne zo Nofar. Kalne is a place called Nofar. Ninfi. So maybe it's called Nofar Ninfi. Let's take a look at this. Okay. Ve'ien be'Ezra, and check in the book of Ezra, chapter 4, verse 9, Parsaya, where he talks about in Aramaic, this is an Aramaic part, Arkavaya, Bavlaya, Shoshan Chaya. Upiresh, Rashi, and Rashi explains there, Arkavaya, Hem B'nei Erech, that they are the children of Erech. Shene'emar ve'erech ve'akad ve'kalneh, because it does say erech, apad, and kalneh. Ad kan lashono v'yitachen, and it would appear shegam yeter hashemot mekuvanim lahashemot shebe'elu hapsukim im ezo shinuyim. And he says that the rest of those place names are by and large very, very similar, and with the ones in Ezra, and that even so, of course, the Aramaic is you know, it's just simply a different version of these countries, and maybe in the Aramaic it sounds a little easier to identify. But the point is I think he's making is that Rashi, in explaining the Hebrew here, is just referencing the Aramaic in Ezra. And we are going to stop here today. So let me mark the space. Okay. Let's see here. Okay. All right. We'll start here next time. Excuse me. Let's see if I can do this. Okay. All right. Any comments at this point? Okay. Nothing for the record.